Hey, Victor, what do you remember about your dad? I remember one time we had this fry bread eating contest, and he ate 15 pieces of fry bread. It was cool.
You know, Thomas, I don't know what you're talking about half the time. Why is that?
I don't know.
I mean, you just go on and on talking about nothing. Why can't you have a normal conversation? You're always trying to sound like some damn medicine man or something. I mean, how many times have you seen Dances with Wolves? 100, 200? Oh, jeez. You have seen it that many times, haven't you? Don't you even know how to be a real Indian?
I guess not.
Well, shit, no wonder. Jeez. I guess I'll have to teach you then, ain't it? First of all, quit grinning like an idiot. Indians ain't supposed to smile like that. Get stoic. No. Like this. You gotta look mean or people won't respect you. White people will run all over you if you don't look mean. You gotta look like a warrior. You gotta look like you just came back from killing a buffalo.
But our tribe never hunted buffalo. We were fishermen.
What? You wanna look like you just came back from catching a fish? This ain't Dances with Salmon, you know. Thomas, you gotta look like a warrior. There. That's better. And second, you gotta know how to use your hair.
My hair?
Yeah, I mean, look at your hair. It's all braided up and stuff. You gotta free it. An Indian man ain't nothing without his hair. And last, you gotta get rid of that suit, Thomas. You just have to.
Hello and welcome to Book versus Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of coloniabook.com and this is my good friend and co-host Margot D. of Brooklyn Fitchick.
Hi everyone.
It's still August. We were just saying before we got on the air, like summer is still like clinging by its fingernails. And we have a really, really exciting book and movie that we're going to be talking about today. But before we get to that, if you are new, this is a podcast where we talk about movies that have been adapted from books, although we've been doing a new episode every single week for kind of a long stretch now. And that means we're considering any kind of literary source. When we say book, it could be a book, it could be fiction, nonfiction, it could be a magazine article, it could be a poem, a song. As long as it has a literary source and it's been adapted into a movie, we will consider it. The only real rule is that it has to be accessible to everybody, streaming somewhere that everybody can get their eyes on it, and also the book has to be available. You know, it's not something that we're going to have to get on eBay for $80.
Right.
So, if you have suggestions for books and movies or adaptations that you think we should do, there's a few places where you can make those suggestions, meet other listeners of this podcast, and interact with us on the internet.
We have a basic Facebook page. Be sure to like it. All the episodes are posted there first, but we are much more interactive in our Facebook group. So you type in Book vs. Movie Podcast Group and ask to join. And we really do just talk about books and movies there and old-time movie stars. And it's a really nice, safe place in the Facebook world to hang out. We also have 2 posts when you go on there from Thaddeus that was kind enough to do that for us. One post at the very top of the page is all the episodes we've done before. And then the other post is all the ideas that people have. But people are always starting new posts with their ideas, which is great, which is fine. But anyway, you can also reach out to us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. You type out book versus a movie at those 3 places, and then you will find us. And we have an old-timey email. Book versus Movie Podcast, spelled it all out, at gmail.com. Send us your suggestions, or if you would like some stickers, send us your address and we will get them to you.
And if you really enjoy the show and like to help keep us in books and movies, you can also support us on Patreon.
Patreon, Book VS Movie Podcast. Look that up there. We have a combination of some free things and then 10 years, basically. It's 9 years of material that we have up there. Some of them are free. Many of them are just from a couple of years ago, and they're excellent episodes like our Psycho and Silence of the Lambs, Harold and Maude. Those are all on our Patreon wall. So we're keeping 2 years worth of stuff in the regular feed, and then that's a paid feed. And we literally use the money to buy paperbacks, to buy the streaming services. Like, it is to help with the show, the software, everything. So for those of you that do that, we really, really appreciate it. For those of you, if money's a little tight and it's not really in your budget right now, we totally understand. If you could just leave us a few stars or a review wherever you get your podcast, that would be amazing. Or just tell a friend about the show.
And okay, so today we're talking about Smoke Signals. Screenplay by Sherman Alexie, based on one of Sherman Alexie's short stories, which is called, what is it called? What it means when we talk about Phoenix, Arizona. Is that what it's called?
I got it right in front of me. This is what it means to say Phoenix, Arizona. Sherman Alexie, 1993. Okay.
And it's from a collection of short stories called The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fist Fight in Heaven, if I'm remembering correctly, right? Now, okay. We just found out that Sherman Alexie is a little more complicated than we originally thought.
It's one of those, I'm going to do a deep dive of the author, and he's so well respected. And I was like, this is going to be fun. It's going to be, and it's like,
yeah, dang it. Dang it.
Yeah.
But let me talk about Sherman Alexie in the 90s. So Sherman Alexie in the 90s he was a young man who, I would say, like, a really gifted, particularly short story writer. His first thing that I remember people talking about him about was a book called Reservation Blues, which was a really, to me, in style, it's sort of like a Raymond Carver meets, who's that one that wrote Skinny Legs and All? Robbins.
Oh, Tom Robbins, not Tony Robbins.
Yeah, not Tony Robbins. No.
We're a little punchy today.
Talk about problematic. It's sort of that style. There's some like magical elements, but really interesting characters. And it's a cool book. And I remember really liking it when it came out. And actually the two main characters in the book are also the two main characters in our story that we're going to be talking about and in the movie. But in Reservation Blues, I think they're older. I think that they're older than they are in the short story, if I remember correctly. So we still have Thomas and Victor, these two young men. In the book, they're from the Spokane Reservation. In the movie, they're on the Coeur d'Alene Reservation. But it is a look at contemporary American Indians who are living in contemporary times, and what does that mean, and what are the things, how do the human themes play out in this kind of a backdrop from someone who is familiar with it. And it's an interesting point of view that you just don't get enough in American literature. It's very, very, I wish there were more available to us. And I think, it's getting a little better than it was in the 90s, but only a little. But anyway, so it was a big deal, is what I'm trying to say. This was a very big deal to have an Indigenous voice telling contemporary Indigenous stories. A really, and a very really young, brilliant young talent. I mean, you can't deny that he's a very, very talented writer. And so, yeah, he became super well-known, renowned pretty quickly, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. It was a long time ago, but I do sort of have a memory of it.
The 90s are blur sometimes.
Yeah, a little bit. And then this movie comes out called Smoke Signals. And this movie was a huge deal. My husband's family are all from Spokane, Washington. And it was a massively big deal there. But I remember seeing the film here in San Diego. And here also, it was such a huge, like, it was a big kind of cult hit movie.
It played the San Diego Film Festival. It seems, I think it did really well there. That movie won a lot of awards there. So I was wondering about that.
Yeah, I remember it showing for kind of a long time, because I saw it several times on the big screen. Let's talk about our author a little bit.
All right. We'll start with the basics here. It's Sherman Joseph Alexie. He was born October 7th, 1966, Spokane, Washington. He is a part of the Spokane tribe, Spokane Reservation. He was born with a condition that was going to cause problems on his brain. He had to have an operation when he was very, very young. He did recover. He was very smart and he did well in school, but I'm sorry, that's my cat walking across right now. On another show that I work on called What a Creep, we talked about North American Indigenous schools, reservation schools. There is just 4 or 5 generations of trauma that is going through our culture, the Native American culture, that I'm saying myself as a white person, I'm just learning what that means, what that truly means, and what it does to a people. And so for him to come out of there, and he's so funny, and I've been watching interviews with him. He's very charming, very funny. He's a great way with words. He was going to be a doctor, but then he found out he didn't like to dissect people. But that's why I think the character of Thomas is a doctor, the actor who plays him is a doctor actually in real life.
Yeah, he's a real doctor.
Yeah, which is amazing. But so he does really well. He starts writing short stories. He's won incredible awards. The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian is like one of the biggest YA books. He broke through all these genres, all these different types of literature, and has done very well for himself. And he was so lauded that there were scholarships in his name. He wrote the script for this movie, and he became just even more famous after that. And then I guess I should just say that there was 2018, the Me Too movement happened here, started here in America, and it was basically abusive people being called out for abusive behavior. And he was accused of sexual harassment by numerous women. And I was saying to Margot, I was off the air, like I was doing my research. It's like 3 a.m, which is not a great time to like take in that kind of information. But he treated women really badly. And some of them were writers and were Native American writers. They were hoping to have a mentor. And it felt to them like he climbed up that ladder and then kicked it out from under him. And I was saying to her also, there was interviews where he's talked about like, oh, I'm around women all the time. Women. They're my bosses. They're the people that take care of my books. They're the ones that come to my shows and they buy my books. So he's given an apology for his behavior. So this is 2018 when all this started coming out. He writes a Substack now. He still writes. Once again, it's somebody who has not a great past. We've talked about Roald Dahl. We've talked about several authors that have had, and you do go through that, the artist versus what they produce versus who they are. That's where we stand with it. He won the Penn Faulkner Award. He's just National Book Award for Young People's Literature in 2007. He's incredibly lauded. He is somebody that really helped, bring this generation of writers, this storytelling to life, and really helped showing the liberal white publishing world that you can sell books by people who are Indigenous, but it's still a man taking advantage of women that admired him.
Yeah.
And as a woman, it's like, we're literally human beings. We're not just little date machines that you get to like figure out to score with and then just move on. It's not okay.
Yeah, I know. And I know it's just very disappointing. Heavy sigh. And especially because one of the things, maybe not so much with his, at least this particular story, and I would even add Reservation Blues, because I've read it. But one of the things that I liked about the movie, which again he wrote the screenplay for, versus the book, is the women, the characters, the way that the women are written, I think is really interesting and very much 3-dimensional. I think they're the funniest and most complicated
and toughest
characters in the story. Yeah, I think the women have arguably like all the best moments in the movie. And so that, yeah,
It's
it's very
disappointing.
upsetting. Yeah.
It's but I'm upset for the women and also for the talent that felt like they couldn't, that was knocked out of the way of like maybe achieving
Exactly.
something. That's
Yeah.
that's unacceptable.
Yeah. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's him. But let's talk about this story, because the story, you cannot deny that the story is super good. It's super good. It's different from the movie. It's very short. It's not a long story by any stretch, and the action is packed into a much shorter amount of time. There's not as much, and the women are not as developed in the short story. There's mention of them, what they're going through, but we don't really get to see them as characters in this story so much, but it's still really good. So you have these two young men, and in the collection of short stories that this is in, they are recurring characters. The collection is there's like a cast of characters that come in and out of these short stories in the collection, Lone Ranger and Tonto, Fist Fight in Heaven. And Victor and Thomas are these two young men who are part of this reservation community in Spokane, and they have they show up in different stories, is what I'm saying. So you get little glimpses into their history. Like, are they frenemies? They're sort of like siblings in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Some of their
A
interaction,
lot of sibling energy.
if you read Reservation Blues, you get a lot of that too. And yeah, so like, what is the deal? What is the story between them? And then this particular story,
This is what it means to say Phoenix, Arizona. We should also say, Margot, you and I bought a book last year for the show, and it's called Adaptations from Short Story to Big Screen. So it's 35
Yes.
short stories, and we're going through them all. So we just read this particular short story for this movie. I did not read
Correct.
The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fist Fight in Heaven. I know a lot of people who have, but I have not read it yet. I will read it.
No, I don't. I've read some of the stories, but I have not read the entire thing. I don't think. This is a story about, and there's another story in which Victor's father, I think there's a couple of them where Victor's father pops up. But in this story, Victor's father has already left the family. We gather that he's an alcoholic, probably abusive to Victor and his mom. His mom was also a drinker, but then she stopped at some point. We learn that Victor learns that his dad, who has left them, and it's been years, it's been probably, I don't know, it's been at least six years since he's left. I can't remember exactly how long, but he goes from being like a 12-year-old to being like an 18-year-old. His father has died. One of the themes, or a thing that you see, a recurring motif that you see, is how little money these families have available to them, like in terms of just cash. Mm-hmm. And so when Victor's in the story, this is a little different than in the movie. In the story, when Victor's father dies, he has like a bank account with a few $100s in it.
Like $300.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And Victor can claim it, but he has to go to Arizona to do so. And he doesn't have the money to go. And so what is this guy, this Thomas, this guy that's in his life that is just sort of in his family, but they're not related, but they are, such an interesting dynamic. They're just there in each other's lives. And we don't quite know why. Thomas says, "Hey, I've got the money. For your plane ticket." In the book, it's a plane. Mm-hmm. For your plane ticket, I'll buy a plane ticket, but you got to take me with you. And Victor's like, "Ugh, yeah, okay, fine," because he's thinking about this money. Like, okay, I'll wait till I can get there. I'll get this money. My dad's truck is there. I can drive the truck back. I think that's even in the story. And
he's going through grief too. We should understand. You and I both know what that feels like, and you're just trying to get through the day. Sometimes you're like,
Yeah, even if the guy, he's dealing with grief already that he left in the first place.
Right.
And now he's dead and nothing is ever going to be resolved.
Right.
And he's like barely kind of coming to grips with that. And so, so this part of the story is actually quite short because it's just a plane ride, and a plane ride from Spokane, Washington to Phoenix, Arizona is not that long. Mm-hmm. It's not like 7 hours. They're on the plane. And again, these are young men, they're coming of age and they've known each other all their lives. And so they're very, like Margot said, very sibling-y. And Victor starts getting after Thomas, like, what? Basically, like, why are you such a dork all the time? Why do you always have to be? Because Thomas is the more, he's he's identified very early on as like a storyteller. He is a dreamy kind of head in the clouds sort of storyteller. He tells all these fantastical stories, stuff that really happens, but he adds all of these magical elements into it. And he tells these stories throughout this short story. Victor finds this very embarrassing, and
because he's heard these stories 1,000 times. I mean,
he's heard
if he's
them
heard
over
them
and
once,
over
he's
again.
heard them 1,000 times. So it just gets on his nerves. And Victor's just not a chatty person, and Thomas is. He just like and so they make an odd combination. But there's love there. I mean, they love each other, but they also when you love someone, they drive you nuts too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so while they're on the plane, there's a girl across the aisle who is like who is like putting her ankle behind her head, like in the plane seat, like doing all these crazy contortions. And Thomas, the storyteller, the dorky one that Victor's getting after, starts like chatting her up. It's like, hey, wow, I wish I could do that. What's your deal? Like, she says she was an alternate on the Olympic team for the 1980 Olympic team. But she didn't get to go because of Jimmy Carter, and Victor's sitting in the middle of this, like, I can't, like, really, this is really happening. This is my life. I'm here on the plane with this guy that drives me crazy, and he's chatting up this woman with her ankle behind her head, and
she's acting like she's a total victim still of like something terrible. And it was like, you were an alternate on the team. I mean,
yeah. And then they go to Arizona. We learn in the book, it's a little more grisly. Like the dad had a trailer, and he was in the trailer for like a week before he was found. And so everything in the trailer smells like death. They are kind of going through his things, and they don't want everything in the place smells terrible. So there's only a few things that they collect to bring back with them, but they also get the money, and I think they also get his truck in the story. I think the truck is in the story. I think we do learn in the story that Victor's dad had saved Thomas's life, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we learn what we learn in the movie about that.
Right. We don't learn that. No, that's probably from another story. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a story. It's a short story about when trauma and grief go unresolved. What do you do when the person with whom you have unresolved issues is no longer available for them ever to be resolved? How do you deal with that? And then you have the greater themes of men's relationship to each other, this relationship between these two young men who are the same age, but also the relationship between Victor and his father, and also the relationship between Thomas and Victor's father, because they had a relationship, because Thomas's parents are dead. He's raised by his grandmother. And so it's this dynamic between these three men, really, one of whom is dead. And also some of the trauma, that is visited on Victor's mother and Thomas's grandmother by the tragedy so he similarly has unresolvable trauma because Thomas's parents died when he was a baby. So it's a lot about that. And how do you, who are you in that? And also at that point in your life, when you're trying to figure out who you are in the world anyway.
And it's tough because you grew up on a reservation. So, people have their opinions about people, that grow up differently.
And they encounter that as they're on their odyssey.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a really great story. It's a really, really good story, and it's very well written. And I absolutely adore the way it was developed into this film.
Yeah.
I know some of the other characters in the film are from some of the other stories, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. But I love the whole way that the extra characters that we get, and as I say, particularly the way the women because you can't help but wonder when you're reading this short story about these women who don't really have that much to do, but you learn about like, geez, the stuff that they're like. Thomas's grandmother has lost her daughter, and I think it's her daughter and son-in-law, and has had this
and has
child
a
to
newborn. A baby, a little baby to like take over. Something she thought, I'm sure she thought was like not in the cards for her anymore. She had done that.
Yeah. And Victor's mother had her own alcoholism that she was dealing with, and trying to get herself sorted out for her own son's sake. Then her husband leaves, who she loved, but he had a lot of things that he couldn't deal with, that he was turning to alcohol. And when she learns that he's dead, I mean, she's really devastated, because you get the idea that she also wanted to have some resolution, one way or another, of that. And so even though the women don't get a lot of like page time, a lot of like word space, you can't help, they are a major presence in this story. So I love the way that they're eventually developed into the screenplay. But anyway, that's the story. It's these two boys, they're like 18-ish. One of them, whose dad abandoned him a while ago, the other one whose parents died when he was a baby, and the dad who ran off is dead. But he maybe has a little bit of money, and they go to get it. And yeah. And that's it.
Yeah. It's a beautiful story, though. And
it really is.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, he's a great writer. We're not going to deny that. I mean, what he's saying that he isn't, but it's a beautiful story. And, we sometimes have these issues, like with the writer, the director, or this is a Miramax film, by the way. So Harvey Weinstein is a part of this as well. So there's a lot that's going on here. So should we get into the movie now?
Yes.
All right. But first, Margot, I want to tell you about a new podcast, and it's called Calm History. And if you are a rotten sleeper like I am a rotten sleeper, every once in a while...
Me?
Yeah. I need to put something on that's going to... And so this is a podcast. They're about 30 minutes in length, and they just talk about things in history. They have a whole series about the Titanic that I was listening to. And it's not quite AMSR, but it's just this very lilting, calm voice that just tells these different stories. And they're at calmhistory.com, or you can find it on your app, wherever you are. But I just it's super fun. I was just checking this out, and I'm just adding it to my rotation of things to listen to.
That sounds right up my alley. Because, we were just saying before I got in the air, I travel for work a lot.
Yes, she does.
And a lot of times that means like crazy hours. And so my sleep gets really messed up. And I am always looking for stuff like that.
Right.
Stuff that's not going to make me like anxious or angry, but I still want to kind of learn something. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, they like our show.
I'm subscribing.
So, they like our show, so they thought, their audience would, we thought our audience would like them as well. All right, we're going to play the trailer now. This is the 1998 original trailer, and the movie is directed by Chris Eyre. Here we go.
Good morning, this is Randy Pione on K-Res Radio. It's a good day to be Indigenous.
Let's go to Lester Falls Apart at the K-Res traffic ban, broken down at the crossroads since 1972.
Ain't no traffic, really.
Watch where you're going! Jeez! Hey, Victor, you need a ride?
Yeah.
What are you gonna trade for it? We're Indians, remember? We barter.
Thomas, you gotta look like a warrior. First of all, quit grinning like an idiot. Indians ain't supposed to smile like that. Get stoic. You gotta look like you just came back from killing a buffalo.
But our tribe never hunted buffalo. We were fishermen.
This ain't Dances with Salmon,
When Victor's father walked out 10 years ago, he left behind a burning secret that consumed his family. Now, Victor is about to leave the reservation for the first time.
You guys got your passports?
But it's the United States.
That's as foreign as it gets.
On a search for the ways of his tribe.
Thomas! I'm going for help!
The importance of family. learn the truth about his father.
I know how it started.
Nobody knows how it started.
You have to remember one thing, Victor. He went back for you.
Smoke signals.
You guys are heroes, you know? It's like you're the Lone Ranger in Tonto.
It's more like we're Tonto and Tonto.
Margot, were you ever a fan of the TV show Northern Exposure?
Yes.
I was obsessed. I'm still obsessed with Adam Arkin to this
such
day.
a good show.
Because of that show. There's so many cast members from that show that are in this movie, which is such a delight to my 90s brain. That just was like, oh.
This movie is so awesome, you guys.
It is.
If you've never seen Smoke Signals, even though we're going to spoil everything,
yes,
we're not going to spoil your enjoyment of this movie. You will love it. I love this movie so much.
It's like I said, it's a Miramax production. It came out in 1998. Had a small budget, and it's noted for being a film that is completely casted with Native American actors on the reservation. They filmed there. It's an amazing story, and it's shocking that it's not done more often. You know, it was very successful. A lot of people watch this movie, and I've understand that it's become a cultural icon for Native Americans. Like, they trade memes and stuff from this movie back and forth. It's like this shorthand. But we start with Victor and Thomas builds the fire, and they're at we meet them, I believe, at the very beginning of the story. It's at it's July 4th, 1976. There's a fire happening.
Yes.
And the house is burning down, and there's a baby that's basically being thrown into the arms of not Victor. That's Victor's father. Arnold Joseph. So he's captures this baby, and it's amazing, this scene, because the grandmother comes along and realize, like, what's going, because that's her daughter-in-law and her daughter and her son-in-law's house, and she's like, where are they? And they just hand her the baby, and that's when it comes to like, oh my God, the level of this tragedy. And she raises him, and then, like you said, Thomas always looks at Arnold like he's a nice man. He rescued me. He's a big, like, he's a formidable man. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, he really, and Thomas is kind of slight, you know, and just so there's a real, you know, a physical, big dog, little dog kind of thing going on. He really looks up to him, and he knows that this is the man who saved his life. And, he doesn't have a father of his own. And so, you know, his friend, Victor, this is his dad. So he really super looks up to this guy, but he has a lot of problems, Arnold Joseph.
He does. And he and his wife are both alcoholics. They're raising Victor in an environment that's very unstable. And he has a lot of anger in him, and he has a lot of fight in him. I think I think that's part of why he makes it through somehow, but he's angry because his parents are a mess, and his father is very abusive to him, and his mother just lets it happen, and he feels alone. And then he has one friend that he's close to, but Thomas tells the same stories over and over again. So by the time he's a teenager, he's like, I can't deal with this kid. He's annoying me. So then Victor finds himself as somebody who's going to, like, play basketball. He plays sports. He's really active, but he's also very confrontational. He's looking for a fight. By the way, their father just leaves one day. Leaves the wife and child, because the wife decides to go sober, by the way. And there's also a great scene where Victor, the younger actor who played Victor, Cody Lightning, is throwing the bottles.
That kid is amazing, first of all.
We ain't doing this no more! No more! We're done with it!
Told you all I want is the money that got coming to me.
It's over!
more! No more drinking! Did you hear me? No more!
Let go! Let go!
Hit me again, come on! You leave now! Don't you ever come back! You hear me? Don't you ever come back!
Wow.
And that scene where, yeah, they, we get a lot of the father and the mother, again, very dysfunctional, what do we call that? Codependent alcoholics. And she wakes up one morning to this weird sound, like, what is that? And I don't know what that is. And she looks out the window and her son is hurling beer bottles at the dad's truck, just one after the other. And as she's looking at her little boy who's can't do anything else with his anger and frustration, she realizes what's going on. And she says, we have to stop. And she can't wake him up. Like, he's so out. He's not waking up for this. And so that tells us everything we need to know. And so, yeah, she decides, like, if we're going to survive, one of us needs to be sober at least. So I'm going to sober up, and that doesn't go well for the marriage. And he just decides to leave one day. And it's so horrible. And Victor's running out, and it's so heartbreaking. And yeah, and Arnold, the dad, he's a very complicated character. Like, sometimes he's very fatherly and sweet, even. Other times completely violent out of nowhere, just like smacks the kid right in the face out of nowhere for nothing. And his wife, and just totally unpredictable. Like, you just didn't, I can imagine how unstable that would be.
Yeah.
To have this giant man in your house who could just flatten you, and you don't know whether it's going to be good or bad, like, no matter, whenever you encounter him. So yeah, so Victor, then we fast forward to them as we do a lot of back and forth. Them in present day of kind of like 19-ish to being the age they are when Victor's dad leaves, which is about 12. And Victor now is like, he's the cool guy. He's got a lot of anger, but he's like the champion basketball player, which is something that I think Sherman Alexie was good at basketball.
I think you're right.
And basketball is something that's a theme in, I can't remember if it was in Reservation Blues or not, but I think it's also, there's a story about basketball in Lone Ranger and Tonto. And yeah, the other boys like really respect him and think he's really cool. And but then there's that Victor, like, always hanging, he's not playing basketball, but he's telling his corny stories, and like, there he is again. Why he's always like tagging along with us. And then then they get the news. At this point, the dad's been gone for a long time, right? And they get the news that the dad has died, and you see the mom is like really sad. She's really sad about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the movie, it's not so much about the money, although they do want to go get the truck, because the truck apparently still works. And
he was good to his trucks. That's what we're told.
Yeah. Yeah. But also to retrieve his remains. And whatever else, may be of value, but really, it is really more about the retrieval of the remains than anything else, for closure for this family, So it's similar, like, they don't have enough money, and they don't even have enough money for a bus in the movie,
right?
Which is a lot cheaper than a plane. And once again, Thomas is like, hey, I've got cash. It's no big deal, but I want to come with you. And Victor's like, ugh, fine.
Right, instantly.
And so I love that it's a bus. It's so much more fun that it's a bus than that
cinematic.
It's a plane. It's so much more cinematic. So we get to see the Southwest. They are on the bus with the gymnast. We get to see and the gymnast, by the way, in the movie is the one from Northern Exposure that was pregnant.
Yes, Shelley. I think her name was Shelley, and she was dating the old guy, and he was going to live to 110 or something. So he might outlive her. That was the whole thing. It was such a great show. It was very quirky.
It was such a great show.
Did you see Marilyn? She's the one that's driving the car.
Oh my gosh. The characters on the reservation are so wonderful.
Hey, Victor. Sorry to hear about your dad. You need a ride?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Thomas. Need a ride?
You bet.
What are you gonna trade for it? We're Indians, remember? We barter.
A story?
It's gonna be good. Better be good.
During the 60s, Arnold Joseph was the perfect hippie because all the hippies were trying to be Indians anyway. But because of that, he was always wondering how anybody would know when an Indian was trying to make a social statement. But there's proof, Back during the Vietnam War, he was demonstrating against it, and there was this photographer there. He took a picture of Arnold that day, and it made it onto the wire services and was reprinted in newspapers throughout the country. It even made it to the cover of Time magazine. In that photograph, Arnold is wearing bell-bottoms and a flowered shirt, his hair in braids with red peace symbols splashed across his face like war paint. He holds a rifle above his head, captured in that moment just before he proceeded to beat the shit out of the National Guard private lying on the ground beneath him. Another demonstrator holds a sign just barely visible over his left shoulder. It reads, "Make love, not war."
Jeez, did your dad really do that? Oh, then what happened?
Arnold got arrested, but he got lucky. At first, they charged him with attempted murder. But then they plea bargained that down to assault with a deadly weapon. And then they plea bargained that down to being an Indian in the 20th century. Then he got 2 years in Walla Walla.
So what do you think? Well, I think it's a fine example of the oral tradition.
But they're floating just above the land.
First of all, they have their own radio station.
Yes.
And that's really cool because the gentleman who plays the radio announcer disc jockey, if you will, I think he actually had a career in radio, but he was interestingly, he was a big part of the movement that the indigenous people who occupied Alcatraz. Remember that?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He had like a broadcast that he did from Alcatraz, I think.
Holy crap.
Yeah, during the occupation.
Have you been to Alcatraz?
No, I've never been to Alcatraz.
You should do it. It's. I used to live in the Bay Area. Yeah, it's definitely worth it.
I've never done it. And all the times I've been to the Bay Area, I've never done it. I'm sure a lot of people seeing the movie would have known that about him. And so it's really cool to see that he's like the guy that runs the radio station. And then you have the fellow who is the guy with giving the traffic report.
He's just hanging out in his truck.
He's like, yeah, Bill and Susie drove by. They were having a fight.
I think it's all going to slow everybody down. I see the clouds in the sky. That looks clear.
Yeah, he tells them what they look like. He's describing the clouds. It's amazing.
I would listen to that.
And then you have these two women. Again, the women in the movie, the female characters are so fun and so interesting. You have these two women that show up from time to time. These two young women. One of them is Marilyn from Northern Exposure. She's the one who's driving.
Backwards.
And the other one, I can never remember her name.
Velma?
That's her character's name. But
Michelle St. John.
Yes. So she's got a long body of work. But I remember also, I think in the early 90s, she was in this thing I saw on like Masterpiece Theater or American Experience or something like that. And it was this really not easy to watch, but very, very good movie about the residential schools, about the Indian residential schools. It might have been in Canada. It might have been set in Canada. It was called like Where the Spirit Lives or something like that.
I've seen it.
Super good. She's amazing in
Yeah.
it. She's the main character, and she's absolutely phenomenal in this movie. So she and who's the one that played Marilyn?
Elaine Miles.
Elaine Miles. So she and Elaine Miles are these completely kooky women. They have this big American car that they can only drive backwards.
And
it's great.
Thankfully, it's like a flat road. I mean, and nobody's on the road with them or at all.
Yeah.
Basically, they have it all to themselves. They're
and
great.
then, of course, you have Thomas's grandmother, who, you know, with whom he very clearly has like a super, super deep bond. You know, like they really, really care for each other. They really look after each other. She's like, "What? You sure you want to go with Victor? Like, he's not very nice to you. You know, like, I'm not sure he's such a good friend to you. Are you sure this is a good idea?" And then, of course, Victor's mom, who is, oh, she's so good. She's so good. I love that character. Like, it's just so fascinating. And she is worried. She sort of wants him to go because she also wants closure, but she's scared that he won't come back. She's scared that he's going to leave her too. It's just super good. And then later on in the movie, once they get to Arizona, we meet Susie Song, who's not in this story at all. I don't know if she's in one of the other stories, but I really loved her character because she's
Irene Bedard.
She played the voice of Pocahontas.
Pocahontas, yes.
Yeah. I mean, if you see her in the movie, you're like, oh, that's Pocahontas.
Yeah.
That's what she looks like. And she is a really interesting character. Fascinating. She had been a nurse. She's like a hospital administrator. She works in Indigenous health services of some kind or another. And she also seems to kind of be running away from certain things in her life. And she and Victor, Victor's dad, Arnold lived out in the middle of nowhere in Arizona. She had a trailer and he had a trailer, and they were friends. And she says in the movie that they kept each other's secrets.
Right.
And she knows who Victor is, and she has a pretty good idea of what he may be going through and what his relationship with his dad might have been.
Well, I guess we'll walk home. You sure you don't want me to grab those?
Oh, no. I think I can make it.
It's a long walk.
Hey, where are you from, man?
Plummer, Idaho. You know, I got me a ex-wife and a son up there.
What are you doing down here, then?
I don't know. Guess I'm still trying to figure that out. Susie, what's the worst thing you ever did?
What do you mean?
I mean, what's the most evil thing you ever done to another person?
Oh, I don't know if I want to answer that.
Come on, tell me.
Let's see. This one time at a powwow, I stole this old Indian woman's purse. There was like a couple of $100 in there, and I spent it all. Man, that was probably all of her powwow money, too. I bet she just cried.
Yeah, that's bad. There's got to be something worse than that, isn't it?
Come on, what about you? It's your turn. What's the worst thing you ever done?
Oh, wait, it's still your turn. I mean, you got to have done something worse than steal money.
Okay. How about this? Back in college, I slept with my best friend's boyfriend.
Oh, now that's bad. Must have broke some hearts that day, innit?
At least 3.
Yeah, just like me. I broke 3 hearts, too.
She shares that, like, from her, we learned that Arnold quit drinking. Arnold Joseph. Arnold quit drinking. He did want to go back to his family. Like, that was something that he really was planning to do. He had some things that he was running from and trying to come to terms with and trying to resolve himself. Some things that he was deeply ashamed of. Most importantly, that he truly did, for all of the damage that he did, he really did love his son.
Yeah, he didn't have the tools.
She tries to communicate all of that.
To deal with his own anger, his own trauma that he probably grew up with.
Correct.
And he's an addict. And when they're in full-blown addiction mode, I know this personally from my life, they're not fun to deal with. They're not nice. And and it takes a lot to get through all that. And I'm sure he had terrible regrets about his behavior. And then also, like, Victor must think, like, why do you get the best part of him? Why? How come I got the worst?
Exactly.
So when she says, we had a father-daughter relationship, I'm sure he's like, oh, great.
Yeah.
Good for you. I mean, I would be resentful. I mean, it's once again, and in this Native American communities, there's the rate for suicide, drug addiction, sexual assault, much higher than in white. There's a lot of I'm not saying it's just there's a lot of trauma that's kind of generational.
A lot that
gets passed down, and it's
never resolved.
Right.
Starting with our government and
and
the
Catholic Church and
it's just
and
you just have
institutions.
Just like in this story, you have to figure out, how do you go on? How do you continue life and try to be healthy when you can't, there doesn't seem to be any path to resolution for all of that trauma.
Right.
Yeah. And I think the movie does such a beautiful job of exploring all of that, all of their flashbacks, Victor's flashbacks about his dad and Thomas's flashbacks about Victor's dad, that he has very good memories of Victor's dad.
But
and
then
really
he finds out.
Mm-hmm.
Then he finds out how that fire got started.
But Victor never tells him.
Oh, he never tells him?
No, he never tells him. He comes close to telling him.
Okay.
And right when he's about to tell him, they have that accident, which I think is another really great thing in the movie.
I've only seen this movie twice, by the way. Margos seen it like a dozen times. So
I've seen it several times.
Yeah.
I've seen it many times. So they're arguing, Victor's anger and confusion really about what to do about all of these feelings that he has are really starting to come to a head, and Thomas is not helping. and Victor starts lashing out at Thomas, and it seems as though he's just about to spill the beans about how Thomas's parents actually died when they get into a car wreck. And he sees a car that's parked, like, blocking the road, and he veers off to avoid the car and crashes the truck. He doesn't ruin the truck, but he crashes the truck. And when he gets out, he has encountered a drunk driving accident, a really, really bad drunk driving accident. A drunk man who was in the car with his wife
and daughter.
He drove into another woman's car.
Oh, okay, sorry.
A young woman's car, and there's another person who's really badly hurt. And the drunk man is raving, and he sees these two young brown men, and is like, "You were drunk. You did this.
Because that's
this
what
is all
people
your
do."
fault."
Right.
And that's what he tells the cops, because he is white. They get hauled in by the cops, and Tom Skerritt
of the whole thing. I was so excited.
Tom Skerritt holds them in, and they're like, "We are dead because this white man said that we did this, and they're going to believe this white guy over us." And Tom Skerritt's like, "Yes, this Mr. Cicero said that you were drunk and you attacked him and tried to kill him, and that you crashed into this other car." And they're like, "Well, we didn't, but you're not going to believe us.
Or the
And he's
woman
like,
the eyewitness who wasn't drunk and tells the cop, right.
yeah. And so, but then we learned that Mr. Cicero's wife was like, yeah, my husband's full of crap. They were not at fault. They went to get help. And so they are off the hook for that. And then they go home. And, they've got the truck, they've got the remains of Arnold. And I mean, when he gives, Thomas had all his money in this mason jar. Mm-hmm. He's got like bills and coins and like, that's all his money. And it was all in this big mason jar. And it's now down to like the last few coins, like 3/4 that are still left in the jar. And Victor takes the rest of the change out of the jar and puts some of his father's ashes in the jar and hands them to Thomas. And it's just, and I'm a mess. I'm a weepy mess then.
I don't know if Adam Beach plays Victor, who's fantastic. And
he's so good.
And Evan Adams plays Thomas, and they are such a great duo.
They're wonderful.
They're
really so great together. Their chemistry together is so, you so buy that these two have known each other their entire lives, and that they just have a completely shared history, and you get that Victor, like that Thomas drives Victor crazy, but he just can't, but he also knows. He also loves him, they're also really close. They can talk about really personal things. Like that's the thing for as much as Thomas drives Victor crazy, he never shies away from discussing like really super personal things about himself with Thomas. He never says like, we're not talking about that or anything like that. They talk about those things because they're that close. And then they return, Thomas returns to his grandmother, Victor returns to his mother, and at the very end, there's that amazing scene where he's on over the Spokane River on the bridge, and he's throwing the ashes into the bridge. And my only thing about this movie that I dislike is that wig.
Oh, what is with the wig? Can you explain the wig?
Like we talked about this, and we talked about last week about the Condor, about 3 Days of the Condor. How in the story, like the girl and Wendy in a wig, like that's going to work. With the wig technology was just not there,
right?
Until very recently, the wig technology was such that you could spot a wig from 3 miles away. Just the synthetic, just know, like your brain just knows that is not human hair. And, like lace front, that was not really a big thing. It was not that, it's a very recent thing that we have the wig technology that we do now. And so there's this scene where he cuts his hair, and there's this whole thing about Arnold cutting his hair and then Victor cutting his hair. So but instead, then his short hair is this super bad wig. It's real bad.
Cut the hair. Why didn't he just,
I think maybe he had another role.
Oh,
perhaps.
It's beautiful hair. I get it.
It's gorgeous hair. and he's he's worked a lot. He's got a large body of work, that actor. And so I always thought that maybe he was already kind of working on another project. Maybe it was something they did in reshoots. I don't know. It is not a wig.
That is something you would do in a reshoot. Yeah.
But that sequence, other than that sequence is so beautiful because the voiceover is Thomas. And he poses this question of like, how do we, again, as young men, how do we forgive our fathers? How do we forgive them for this? How do we forgive them for what they did? How do we forgive them for what they didn't do? And he's exploring like all of the ways in which a young man would need to have that kind of resolution with his father. But it closes with a question. It doesn't answer the question. It closes with another question, like, what do you do when that can never be resolved?
Yeah.
Then what do you do? And that's so you have to walk out of the theater going like, yeah, what would I do? Oh, I don't know. What would I do? Yeah, it doesn't actually answer the question. It just asks more questions.
There's no answer. And you and I both know this because we both lost people. And life is complicated. People are complicated. You think you've resolved something and then something else will bring it back. Life is
absolutely
just not that clear cut.
Nope. So it is such a gem of a movie. It's such a great movie. I think in many ways it did a lot to crack the door open, as tiny a crack as it is,
right.
For literature as much as film, because the storytelling is such on such a high level of the themes and the characters and the conflicts and the lack of resolution of the conflicts. They're just such great stories, and you just can't stop thinking about them. Like I was talking to Todd about it, and he didn't quite remember it at first. And I said, "Oh yeah, you remember? It's like it takes place in Spokane." Like, again, he's from there, and he's like, "No, I don't." And he goes, "Oh, wait a minute, is that the one with those two chicks that drove around in the backwards car?" Because they just stick in your mind, these things.
I love he teases him about, you probably watched Dances with Wolves like 100 times, right? And Tom's like, well, yeah. What's wrong with that?
It's awesome. I just love it. I could watch it again and again. It's one of these movies that YouTube is providing for free right now. So you can go watch it for free. Yeah, it's a great movie. Fantastic soundtrack.
Yes.
Super good soundtrack. Yeah, it's awesome. It's just really wonderful stories, brilliantly acted, great characters, good soundtrack, not your usual kind of backdrop. Love it.
So book versus movie. Oh.
Movie.
Yeah, I'm going to say movie too.
Yeah.
Though I'm going to say I really enjoyed reading the short story. It's
same,
and
it's very good.
It's the kind of reading I like to do, and I kind of I like it. It was yeah, thumbs up for me.
Yep, I love it. What are we doing next?
Well, it's going to be Banned Book Month. It's September,
Yay!
My favorite time of the year.
I mean,
it makes me angry.
But yay!
But yeah, I was looking through our list. Yes, but I was thinking maybe we start with Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Oh, baby.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It's available for rental now. It's supposedly, all my friends that have said is that it's fantastic.
I have not seen it yet.
I wore out all the Judy Blume books.
Same.
Are like my favorites. And
Same.
and I even bought a paperback of it because I want to read it in paperback again, just like when I was a kid.
Me too. I'm going to do that too. I'm going to get my hands on the paperback. Oh, I can't wait to read that again.
Yes.
Oh, that'll be fun.
And send us your suggestions and all those places. That's for Banned Book Month. And then we have Scary Movie Month, like scary, spooky stories, whatever your ideas are. Y'all know the drill by now. But please reach out to us. And once again, our email is bookversusmoviepodcast. Spell all those words out at gmail.com. Margot, where can they find you?
You can find me online at coloniabook.com. And all of my social media callouts are at She's Nacho Mama. And where can they find you?
You could find me on Twitter at Brooklyn Margot. I'm on Threads and Instagram at Brooklyn Fitchick. Brooklyn Fitchick is also my site. And I'm on the TikTok at Margot Donahue. And I put some clips there from the movie, and people immediately, like, they're big fans of this movie. It's pretty incredible. All right, that's it for now. We'll be back soon with Judy Blume. And Margot, I hope your family is... Margot's in a parking lot right now recording this because her entire family is sick.
They all are coughing.
She was on
sneezing.
on a business trip. She comes home and they're just...
Oh,
so I hope you get some rest. All right, we'll be back soon. Thank you so much for listening to the Book versus Movie podcast. We are a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You can find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts. We follow the hashtags LadyPodSquad and Podern Family. If you want to support the show, you can go to our Patreon page, go to Patreon, and look for Book versus Movie podcast. We have a basic Facebook page, but we also have a private Facebook group. Go to Facebook and type in Book vs. Movie Podcast Group if you want to join that. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Book vs. Movie. Spell all those words out. If you'd like to send us an email, it's Book vs. Movie Podcast, spelled it all out, at gmail.com. You can follow Margot D at Brooklyn Fitchick on social media, and Margot P at She's Nacho Mama. Thanks so much again for checking out our show, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.